All right, thank you all and welcome to the first, probably annual, hopefully annual, Datocracy Summit. Yay! I've been watching a lot of Muppet Show with my kids. Thank you all for coming. As you may know, Ernest and I had a session towards the end of last year and kind of went through kind of our dream list of things to do. And as I was pondering all these different things that have been swirling around, and also the larger question of, hey, just to summarize, Ernest and I have been having these conversations for years about how to fix the internet, fix capitalism, fix humanity, fix everything, basically. And he went through this thing called the Zigzag Project with me, where he identified a couple of things about building ecosystems and creating documents that would enable that vision. And that led us to something we called Datocracy, which we later changed to Datocracy. And we thought it was just going to be a handful of one-on-one conversations with people, and we'd sit down at the end and figure out, okay, what have we learned? But everybody we talked to wanted to keep talking. Anish talked to us for 3 or 4 episodes on our podcast, and then Tom has been incredibly generous with his time and his technology for the last couple of months. And so, but it's been a little hard to coordinate times and schedules and keep momentum going. So I'm thinking, okay, what do we want to do? So the idea I had was, what I really want is to not have to do this anymore. I want this thing to become something self-sustaining with enough structure and incentives and ownership that if I disappeared, like, it wouldn't really matter that much. So that's the dream. Because I've got 3 or 4 other ideas, at least as crazy as this, that I want to work on someday. And I don't want to be putting all my eggs in this basket. But there's something real here, and I want to see it become what it can be. So this led to the pitch, which I guess I should just bring up and I won't read through the whole thing, but I'll at least go through the top level to kind of set the frame for what I think, what I would like to talk about, and then we can go from there. So the idea was to say, okay, what is the thing that would really take this to the next level? And, should it be a nonprofit? Should it be a company? But the more I thought about it, I said, whatever this thing is, it feels like it should belong to the future and not the past. And the easiest place to find the future today is in the world of crypto. Now, I am not a crypto believer or a crypto bull. I'm kind of a crypto skeptic. But the thing that tipped me over was a not boring essay last Monday, I guess, about how crypto is sort of an economist's computational dream made real, where you can build imaginary social systems with incentives and see how real people behave. And I realized, that is how we will discover the future, by creating these pseudo-artificial, crazy constructs with real people and real incentives and see what works. And so I said, I wouldn't want to jump into crypto right now, but I feel like over the next 12 months, enough other people will have jumped in that there will at least be a reasonable core set of understandings of, like, if you want to do something in a decentralized, technology-enabled fashion, these are some emerging best practices. And my hope is that by the end of this year, the tools and the practices will be mature enough that you only have to be a little bit crazy to jump onto it. And so I'll just kind of read through the purpose statement here, and then I will open it up for questions and comments. So the vision, what I would like to propose we focus on for 2022, those of us who are interested in Datocracy, whatever that means, is to create a self-sustaining vehicle that does 3 things. It practices Datocracy, it shows people like how it works in the real world, it promotes it and encourages other people to adopt this way of looking at the world and this way of making decisions in the community. And it acts as a steward for Datocracy, the technology, the standards, the philosophy, the brand, if you will. Hey, Anish, I'm just diving into the pitch right now. So I'm on the first sentence. You haven't missed much. So a vehicle that practices, promotes, and stewards Datocracy. And this is as a mechanism to fork humanity. This was the vision that Ernest and I started talking about way at the beginning of our podcast, is that humanity is going in a certain direction and it has some advantages, but it also has a lot of downsides. So can we like do a fork where we say, okay, let's, in the midst of this civilization, I like having running water, I like having grocery stores. Every other Thursday, I like being in a democracy. And we want to keep in that world, but we want to start doing things better and different. And my vision of Datocracy, this is not the solution to all the world's problems, but this is the mechanism that when we find solutions allows them to scale. And that's why I think that creating this mechanism is an incredibly important piece of building this future. And the three verb adjectives I settled on, we could add or subtract some as people like, is towards a more humane, decentralized, and empowering version of civilization. So humane in that it's designed to maximize the flourishing of all individuals, not exploiting some to profit others. Decentralized, which I took an unusual definition here, which I'm open to revising. But one of the insights that came to me during this process is that most injustice thrives on information asymmetries. So a lot of people focus on wealth asymmetry. Wealth asymmetry doesn't bother me. I kind of enjoy it. But I really hate the idea of information asymmetry and power asymmetries that go along with wealth asymmetry and then lead to structural injustices. So can we build a system that is decentralized or decentralizing that really works hard to eliminate information and power asymmetries, or at least diminish them over time rather than allowing them to escalate out of control, which has always destroyed every civilization in history. And then the third thing is empowering. One of the ways to do that is giving everyone the tools needed to monitor and improve upon the system. So the idea is that one random person in the middle of nowhere can really see what's going on and suggest better ways to do a thing, which we kind of can do today at an unprecedented level, but it's a very ad hoc, cobbled together approach. And the idea of Datocracy is let's make this thing a formal, maintainable, sustainable system. So anyway, that's the rant. That's the basic pitch. Everything else is details. Let me shut up and let you guys react. And I'll nominate Ernest to speak first because he's the godfather of all this.
Godfather, okay. Well, I like that. I like it encompasses three values that I have been talking about for years. And this entity would also serve as a hub, as the center of a bunch of spokes that we can contribute to. When each of us starts their own project, let's say humankind, let's say whatever Ernie you're working on, what was it, EGWET and all those things, that just like in open source, and you have Debian, or you have BSD as well, that you have a central place where people get ideas from, get code from, then they can put it in their own projects, and then, oh yeah, this works well, let's take it upstream. And also having simple things, like I saw some video a couple of days ago talking about how you should simplify and not simplify life, simplify your processes, and how okay, how do we make decisions? You consult, I don't know, three things: your values, your ideals, your goals, and if those things match whatever you're trying to do, okay, then you do it. If it doesn't, nope, you don't do it, period. There should be, once you reach a point where, oh, we're not approving too many things, so maybe we should change our values and ideals. Well, that's where you talk about changing your organization. Like if something if we have, oh, Datocracy, yeah, it's great, but there's some new stuff that we didn't foresee. Maybe we should include that in our values and our ideals. Some new technology, some new social structure that we cannot foresee. For example, I'm thinking of my own projects are like, I can't deploy them this year or next year or next decade even. I'm talking about things for the next generation. Like you think about and you mentioned crypto, right? I wasn't I still kind of am in the crypto bandwagon, but it's mostly like a tool. It's not like, oh yeah, let's do an ICO and let's start this decentralized thing and let's think about governance. I'm like, it's too complicated. Let's just use what's there, but that has been it has a good reputation. You have Bitcoin, you have Ethereum. In my case, I like Cardano. So you have this project that forms either time or policy. They have a good reputation in themselves, right? Cardano is more like, oh, we have to be correct and we have to test. And if I lost your video, do you have my audio? Okay, so we have to test, and we stick to our milestones. And if it slips a little bit, it's fine because our principles tell us that we have to be correct. So they have stuck to that, and you see that even though the value of the coin is kind of down right now. All the projects that start are really recent, what is it, Polygon and others that have had good performance, right? Because they have seen the mistakes of other projects, but at some point, oh, they got either they go down or somebody hacks them, and sometimes they survive fine, but others, they're more like what's fashionable. Like what's fashionable right now is Polygon and Solana and all those things. That seems to be okay, but I don't know if they've been up for just a couple of years, and you're like, yeah, they look good, but I don't know. And you wait for, I say, well, okay, there's this thing called crypto that can hold value. It has some platforms in there that you can do things with, but that's just a tool. We ourselves, we cannot be based on that because, like you said, it changes. Who knows what's going to be in the future? We have quantum computing. How is that going to affect all these things? So what we can declare and live by are simple things, our values, our ideals, our goals, and maybe even a North Star. So what is the one thing that guides us? And you define those things and then you let it go. Yeah, it's almost automatic, even though we want to implement some automation, some computers, some smarts to store knowledge, to store information so that people can get knowledge, to manage decisions, to capture how decisions are made and were made so that future decisions are informed by those things. So we can, in my case, we can gradually go to a place where the system kind of runs itself and makes decisions that humans, of course, can look into and say, oh, yeah, it's good. Because the system itself stores all this knowledge. Right now, people walk around with knowledge in their heads that nobody else has. And they can use that knowledge however they see fit, for good or for bad. You can see that in judges. Judges say they're impartial, but we can see that they are not. They have their own values and principles, and that guides them in how they interpret the law and case law, so that for the same exact case, two judges can come to different conclusions. So to me, that's not a system that is it's not a system that you can base anything on, because depending on what judge you get, that's, the decision can be the way that the judge has decided things in the past, the way that the judge believes in things or not. So that is not a system that we can base anything on. I say it has worked so far. Well, it has worked well or even badly. So this is what we have right now. We are alive, and this is our environment. So we have to look for ways to change that. So yes, I'm thinking that we have, we were talking about the Datocracy for months with Tom now. So we have to put it in an entity, just like Ernie suggests. We have to create this thing that people can look at, and they can test, and they can investigate, so that going forward, this thing will exist, and future generations can take advantage of it, learn about our past, learn about its past, the values that it holds, and keep changing it and adapting it to the current situation. So yeah, I agree with these three principles, and with the idea of having a place and a thing that encompasses our thoughts and our experiences and our ideals and our ideals for the future, and how people should be treated, how much power people should actually have, not just think that they have, and how much information you can have true access of, and how much control you have over your private information. To me, that's important too. There's information that is private to you, your health, your well, mainly your health, right? But also how you live, your identity, where you live, all those things that are private to you that people shouldn't have access to. You should have control over that information. So that's something else that is kind of separate from this, but to me it's important. It goes into the realm of information and information control and hosting and all that. So yeah, to let me not keep walking, keep talking, because I could, but I agree with what Ernie has said, and I support it, and I'm happy that we're doing it.
All right, anyone want to go next?
I'll jump in on this one. I'll say that I'm pretty new to this. I'm one of the most recent, I guess, additions to this. So there's a lot that I'm still wrapping my head around with this. These are just my initial thoughts based off of what I can remember I was talked about before. So, I'm software engineer and exposed to new technologies, new tech trends all the time. And in my experience, I have come to have a lot of respect for older technology and the tried and true versus the new trendy thing, even if it has a lot of potential. And one thing that I tend to be a little bit cautious about is building a brand new something on top of another brand new thing. So it just increases the chances of something going wrong in that chain. So just an idea, or just sort of an initial reaction, I should say. It's that I would actually take a hard look at what has worked on the web for the past 25, 30 years. Forums are one, social networks are another, basic web pages are a third. But do a deep dive into those pieces and see if there's something in the existing working mechanisms that we can use as a foundation for our piece. So instead of basing everything off of cryptocurrency, basically kind of creating a currency that isn't a currency, and trying to mash these two concepts together. I'd like to know if it's or suggest that it might be worth it to look at, say, social networks. Very flawed in a lot of ways, but something that we understand really well, and or look at other pieces of technology that are tried and true and popular, and see if we can, if those could work as a good foundation to build this on top of.
Okay, just one let me just make my little caveat there, because I think that, so the one technology we have looked at the most, so I think one thing that's quite clear is the driving thing for me is really trying to build something in a decentralized fashion, right? And so that eliminates a huge chunk of things that have worked really well for the web for the last 20 years, right? Like Facebook and Twitter and Apple and Google's environments. So if we're trying to restrict ourselves to like things that work well in a peer-to-peer decentralized fashion, the most successful one that I'm aware of is probably the Fediverse, which is a social network built around distributed peer-to-peer protocols. Another exemplar in this place probably is Git, and the Git technology of distributed version control, where you have this sense of shared ownership of the code and being able to fork and reproduce things. But artists and I did a deep dive on this, and so if there's something where we're looking, let us know. The thing that is always been the stickler for this is there's lots of shared communication models. There are not very many shared ownership models. There are things like foundations and so forth, but again, those are centralized entities. And the one point that is maybe leaping up forward here that I didn't really reference a lot was, to me, the most interesting thing to standardize on is sort of a definition of datocracy. What are these values and virtues that we want to promote? And very much in the spirit of the open source definition that I was involved with for many years, and that it's not like that big of a deal, but it provides a hub, as Ernest says, where people can come and say, this is what we're talking about, and this is a place to find out who's really doing this and who's pretending to do it, and what are the different flavors and styles of it. And so my thinking is that the main goal of this group is less for communication, all these other things, but really to own something. And in terms of decentralized ownership models, it's either something fairly amorphous, like just a bunch of friends sharing it, ad hoc, or it's something very heavyweight, like a foundation or a B Corp. And so to me, crypto was an interesting third way of creating some sense of ownership in a way that was, even though it's very avant-garde and I agree risky, it is relatively lightweight compared to the legal overhead of setting up a foundation and a board of directors and all these sorts of things. At least that's my naive thought at this point of where I think things will likely be in September. I could be completely off base on that, but that was the stake in the ground I wanted to throw out there. So that's where I'm coming from with that.
What if we took a look at less of the actually, how about this? How about if we took a hard look at the internet itself, and what's enabled a bunch of separate platforms to jump on top of it? Basically, what I'm thinking of is, while I do believe that there's great strength in centralization, people tend to gravitate towards destinations. And if we look at another old idea, the market economy, then it works off of the idea of, yes, there will be winners and losers, but what you really want to create the most ideal situation is to have a constant churn of new entrants, old entrants dying away, and a bunch of really good solutions that are constantly competing against each other and leaving room for a new entrant to come in at any time. So with that, if we look at, from my perspective, if we take pull the lens back on the interwebs and how it works, it's basically a collection of shared standards governing, like HTML rendering, image, basically media files, text, and that sort. Those are shared across the board, and we do have foundations that help to govern those, or just, new standard comes up and people adopt it, so that's fine. But then the way that individual entities make use of that can vary quite a bit. Twitter is based, built on top of it. So is Facebook, so is TikTok, a new entrant, and that sort. There are new paradigms that come up all the time. Search engines, social networks. The old portal website concept, Yahoo and Excite, which was displaced by the new entrants. And so perhaps the approach is to just create a agreed upon set of standards. We may need a type of foundation to manage it. Council similar to what we set for, say, ISO standards, or how we settle on USB or HDMI standards, although those are not the most ideal, but it's what we have and it works. And then basically create an environment where it's super easy for people to build on top of it. But still make use of those same standards, so you preserve interoperability between whatever entrants decide to enter this field.
Yeah, just in order to kind of put a bow on this and let other people talk, I think you and I are probably 2/3 of the way in agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that we want to create standards, we want to create a common terminology, we want to create an open ecosystem. And that's why I put the actual technical decisions of how we build this thing to like September, because that is the thing, in some sense, that is aspirationally useful, but practically irrelevant in the short term. First, you have to have something worth owning and something worth standardizing on that people actually care about. You and I can have lots of long talks about the ugly underbelly of the IETF and the W3C, which I've been involved with at various places. And I have a deep appreciation and admiration for those organizations, but I also see some structural limitations in their business models. And that is the thing that I don't think I know how to solve, but I think that the people who are trying to experiment with alternatives for that are hanging out in the Web3 space. And I'm betting it's by no means a guarantee that sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, people will come up and say, oh yeah, that actually does solve all these problems that we've historically faced with our centralized standard organizations. It may not be the case, and we may say, it's still, in second thought, maybe these centralized organizations did know what they were doing and we should just copy them. That is also a possibility, but that's why I'm kind of putting it out there as a long-term sort of end game question.
Yeah.
Does that framing at least make sense?
Oh yeah. And I guess, and I'll just leave it with this. So I'm of the opinion that in the same way that the best government systems, best government structures function as a hybrid, where it takes the best pieces of other systems and places them in the most appropriate places. The U.S. government is part representative democracy, part oligarchy, part a monarchy. In the same way, I feel that the strongest foundation for this means that, yes, we will, something unfortunately will need to be centralized, just so that we can set agreed upon standards, so that we don't put the burden of that on the end user who really doesn't care. But it's, and the bulk of it can be decentralized. I think that that's a worthy goal. Don't get me wrong there. But I think that in the end, we will need some type of centralized standard, if for no other reason than to facilitate communication. Just about that.
Okay. I have a question about centralization. I'm hearing control, and I'm hearing control by few people. So when I think decentralization, I say let's just establish, I guess, the values, principles. This is what we stand. This is what this entity or this group stands for, right? And then everybody can participate. Everybody can feel, not just feel like they are members or customers or users, but that they are actually part of the whole thing. That they have access to contribute to making decisions, contribute to guiding the entity towards the future. So I don't see, when I see foundation, and I'm was even myself thinking, oh, we need a foundation. But what is the purpose of the foundation? What is it? It's the purpose will be to interact with other things like governments, maybe. So we have this problem with the SEC dealing with decentralized currencies. That okay, who is it? There was a problem with one particular one last year, that they couldn't do something because they couldn't do know your user or know your customer things, and because they didn't have an address. So they were a decentralized thing, but they couldn't do that. So our foundation would be something that gives you an address, and I don't know to what level other entities require that humans be, like, okay, there's a person with this name, and this is the person we deal with. If they can deal with something that has no CEO, no person on top of, but you deal with the whole entity, and the whole entity, makes decisions. We still don't have. The governments are not there at all right now, and I don't know if there will ever be, because a government, because of its size and the things that it has to do, it needs people that are there all the time. A decentralized organization, as opposed to a foundation, ideally is the opposite. It's like, no, there's no address, but you still have views, and you still have the responsibilities, and act. It can still act as it is one entity, but it doesn't have a central spoke like we were talking about. You interact with the whole thing or none of it. There's nothing within it, nobody within it that you can point to and blame for things, because no, decisions are made about the whole entity, not just an individual in it. Once you become a member, you're part of it. So it's like, that people tell me that I'm a socialist and whatever, but I see that you deal with this entity, with this decentralized thing. There's no central, and there's no central person. Maybe there's no address, or there's multiple addresses. I don't know, but that's what I see the problem is, and that's why people think. I think that people, even myself, we need a foundation. We need a name. We need something that people can point to, and that others can see as well. And I agree in the sense that, well, I don't know about the address. What do you have an address so that you can hang a sign in there and have some files and have a receptionist? These days we have Zoom, we have all these things, so we have to move away from that, even though it's still ingrained in my head. Oh yeah, this thing has to have an address and a phone numbers, which things we should move away from. But that was my response to your comment to the foundation idea, which is.
It's just to clarify, like, I'm not. When it comes to the centralized foundation, like,
I'm going to call time, because
okay.
I think we're not necessarily that far apart, and we're kind of talking past each other. Tom's been kind of sniping in the chats a little bit, so I want to give him the stage. to share his concerns and make sure that we have sufficient time to address them.
Actually, I'd love to know who Anish is, what he's interested in before I go on, so I can consider that.
He's been with us quite a while, but not recently, and so wouldn't hurt for you to introduce yourself. And we can even do introductions for everybody else too, because the ignorance may be mutual, except for Ernest and I, who knows everybody. Anish, you want to just weigh in? Your audio is not coming through. You're unmuted. If you rejoin your audio.
Oh yeah, I think you can hear me now. Okay, great. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I was about to be really disappointed in my purchase of AirPods Max, which I purchased exclusively for long Zoom calls, and the battery life. My tiny little AirPods were crapping out on me early. So background: I'm a computer scientist and an entrepreneur. I'm the CTO at Quilt Data, and we help companies to unify their data so that everyone is on the same page and can make smarter decisions faster. Deep love for mathematics and now economics. So I'm studying Austrian economics on the side. I'm a little concerned that I may not have time to fully contribute here, but I'll have to take up my beef with socialism with Ernest and kind of a separate thread. But Tom, hopefully that gives you some background, and I would love to hear from you now.
Okay, Anish, where are you physically located?
I'm just outside of Phoenix. I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay. Now, by the way, for people who I haven't interacted with, I put in the chat a link to the Datocracy stuff, which you may know nothing about, right? So it says Datocracy folder, and you can go get that. There's a 6-page science fiction, how things might look in the future, followed by about 50 pages of architecture for Datocracy. And I did it just on a whim for the fun of it. And but the basic idea is we get rid of politicians and political parties, and people, through defining their personal values, get more direct control over what governments do. Okay, I mean, this is a thing we couldn't have done 100 or 200 years ago, but we can do it now. The computers will be an interface between people's values and what governments do. So that's the basic Datocracy idea, and we're using that as a common interest to explore that. Okay, I have put a little thing I call a fun note in there. I was listening to a very long 2-hour video with Elon Musk, and was it? Oh, I forget the name of the guy, but I've got the links. But and he started talking about his Mars colony, and then talking about the people on the Mars colony had to run their own government or organization. And I thought, aha, here's a nice little place to try out Datocracy, running the government in that way up there. And that's just a silly little thought, because we can try out democracy in any town council, put it that way, or any organization or place. But I thought I'd throw it in as a fun idea, and I put it on the internet on my LinkedIn and Twitter with Elon Musk as a hashtag there. That if he wanted, he could use Datocracy as a model for how to run Mars. Anyway, just
quick detour on a point, but it won't be a long detour. There's a really beautiful article on Bitcoin astronomy, how on Mars you'll actually need to use a separate blockchain, because the speed of light, the block clearing times in Bitcoin are about every 10 minutes, and you don't even have a chance if you're outside of half of that value in terms of light horizon. You don't even have. And so he talks about how Terran miners can send hash bombs to. I'll post that in the chat, but too perfect. And I know Elon is thinking about that, and I know he wants cryptocurrency on Mars.
Yeah,
that's called the hash horizon.
Okay, right. So I have another hat, which becomes obvious when you read the Datocracy and the references there. My specialty is planning stuff. Let's say I've spent I just turned 81, by the way. So I spent, and I started working for IBM when I was, 17 years old in 1958. And my consultancy career has been almost from that point in time. So I've accumulated an awful lot of experience in consulting and planning things, and writing about it and teaching it, things like that. And so I have a special method of planning things. Let's call it Planguage, planning language. And we've been playing with it, Ernest and Ernie and I. And what it offers to this enterprise is a systematic way, a better way, I think, of setting our objectives and our constraints and evaluating our strategies and evolutionarily, incrementally delivering change. Okay, that's what I do. And there's masses of free literature from me on how to, for example, a book from 2005, Competitive Engineering, which you can easily access a free digital copy from. So, okay, so that's the background. There's, no matter where we end up going, I'm happy to participate in helping people think clearly and systematically, and not get distracted by trivialities, but focus on the high priority things and the big ideas. And I believe very strongly that any big idea, you can try it out early and incrementally. This, by the way, is exactly what Elon Musk does. And I have a little book manuscript that started as a paper, but it's so large I'm calling it a book, called Musk's Methods, where I actually track exactly his way of thinking, which happens to be very close to my own way of thinking. But what he does, he starts somewhere, and then he keeps on nudging incrementally towards a larger long-term dream. And I believe we can use that for what we're doing here, so we get some interesting results in the short term and learn from that. That's probably enough as a hello introduction to a lot. Yep.
Common thread between what Alonzo and Tom said. Like, anybody who's been in technology is deeply skeptical of complexity and complex systems. And there's a law in general systems theory which says every complex system that works evolved from a simple system that worked. So there's no way to take a complex system that doesn't work and salvage it into a complex system that does work. Right. I hate to say this, the kind of strong statement of, so I think that's great. And I would love to have help incrementalizing the goals. Like, the targets seem really lofty. I'm also concerned, and I think we should answer this because it's an investment of time for everybody who within earshot. What are we going to get out of this? And it doesn't have to be material gain. And I think, Ernie, I was just reading through your document. There are some milestones, like some physical artifacts that we can create, but I think really, you've probably already done this and you're well familiar with this style of thinking. Like Tom is going for, what is the MVP? What are these small things that work that we can know whether we're converging or diverging? Two quick comments. I don't know how possible, maybe this is a good reason to try it. I don't know how possible what we are attempting to do is. And I'm actually writing a paper, I'll be happy to share it, about what systems can be designed and what can't be designed. And there's a quote from Hayek, and it talks about these exact things about, which information is dispersed versus can be centralized. And there's a lot of deep thought that the economists have done on some of the things we're trying to do. And it's a short paragraph. So the curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design. To the naive mind that can conceive of order only as the product of deliberate arrangement, it may seem absurd that in complex conditions, order and adaptation to the unknown can be achieved more effectively by decentralizing decisions, and that a division of authority will actually extend the possibility of overall order. Yet that decentralization actually leads to more information being taken into account. So what is the important thing here? These complex structures happen, they aren't planned. And so what Hayek calls the extended order, all we can do is establish conditions under which certain things can happen. And my last comment will be on one of the impossibilities. It doesn't mean it's not worth trying. It doesn't mean that we won't have some successes. But one of the structural impossibilities in the Datocracy is that the hypothesis is that if people have more information, they will make more decisions. what Hayek points out is that an enormous part.
That's not actually the assumption.
Oh, interesting. Well, so what is the value of data in a datocracy? Let me ask
I
that.
think there's two different premises. It's not because we talk about the tension, the crucial conjecture, right? There's all these trade-offs between if you have too much information and then you have lower relevance. And if you have really high quality, thoroughly vetted data, then you have less recency. So there's all these tensions there. That is very much the case. And I don't want to minimize those tensions. So it's not just like more is better.
Got it. I'll make two things that I'm concerned about structurally. So one is that there's implicit knowledge and there's explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge can be expressed, implicit knowledge can't. And there's an enormous part of the human activity and human autonomy that is information that people will never be able to express. That's called necessarily dispersed knowledge. So that's one thing. The other thing, and I'm amazed that, so as a computer scientist, I'm super interested in formal languages, and a compiler is much more objective than a judge, right? To take an example. I'm super interested in what Planguage is, but I'm highly skeptical that a natural language can ever be given the strictures or the precision of a syntactical language, like of a formal language, right? So anyway, just some thoughts.
Yeah, so I think, let me just say my perspective on this, which I am pushing, right? Because Ernest and I have been having this conversation for years, and there are actually remarkably few things that we actually agree upon because we have very different politics, very different religion, very different economic philosophies. But the thing that we agree on is that if you can have a common basis of data, you have the option of making better decisions, right? If you have an immutable public record in a universally intelligible format, then you can have a lot of people making much wiser decisions that they can't do in the absence of that. And so that's kind of this idea of a communal data platform. Like, I think you're right. Like, you can't, there are things that enable complex systems to arise. Like Alonzo talked about, like the IETF, like, having TCP/IP, which has some flaws, but dang, it works remarkably well. And now every system on the planet can talk, and across the galaxy can basically talk to each other. That is a solved problem that seemed impossible in the 1960s, to get all these different systems to talk together, because they created a standard and incentives that said, well, let's just agree on this and fight at a different level. And so the interesting opportunity for Datocracy is not anywhere, for me, it's not in itself as utopian as the sort of things that Tom and Ernest care about. It's a very minimalist Datocracy. It's like, can we just define standards for how we share data, and in particular, for how we document that we make decisions? So everyone's going to make decisions differently, but if we could get people to standardize how they talk about how they make decisions and how they use data, and a small set of things, probably more than 3, probably less than 12, and it's like, hey, this is a way for people who care about making inclusive, honest decisions, which last I checked, there seems to be, correct me if I'm wrong, more people who say or think they care about making honest, evidence-based decisions than people actually doing it. So either we want to be intelligent and rational and we're not, or we don't want to be intelligent and rational, but we're pretending we are. And it's like, okay, we can't solve everything, but that's a problem we could solve with technology by having immutable data trails and a community that actually is sincerely trying to figure out how to get better at doing this thing that a lot of people say they want to do. So that's the idea, is creating a minimal set of standards and technologies that make it easier for people who care about making good decisions to think more clearly about it themselves, and then communicate that to others, and then create social pressure where you say, hey, if they're making decisions in this really, much richer and superior way, why can't we make decisions the way that they're doing it? And you actually have the ability to import in governance and decision sets because you're operating on some level of a common vocabulary and infrastructure. So that's the minimal idea of Datocracy that I am talking about here.
I hope you'll write that down, because it's very different than anything I got from DD23. And what I
right.
heard,
Yeah.
what I heard was decision support, documentation, and accountability. And that to me is very concise. And it's, you know, again, it's much more grounded than anything that's in DD23.
Right, and so the thing that is interesting, and the thing actually I wanted to kind of present to here, which I think is the, let me actually kind of just lay my cards on the table, because the thing I realized that I was getting frustrated about with Planguage, and I couldn't understand why, I mean, is that like, I realized, oh, Planguage seems to be designed when you have a fixed group of people and a well-defined pool of resources, and you're trying to figure out how to efficiently allocate them in order to achieve a shared objective. And I think that's really good for that. But I realized that's actually not what we have yet. We don't really have a fixed group of people. We don't have a fixed set of resources. And I said, you know, okay, what the thing that, the main things I love about Planguage, but the thing that frustrates me is that it's a closed system. I can't just share a link and tell the world and random people, here, look at what we're doing, and here's all the different versions. And it's like, okay, and Ernest has shared a similar frustration that he wants to create some sort of public forum where you can share stuff which isn't owned by Facebook or Twitter. And something that is sort of publicly accessible and open for people to participate in. I said, you know, I've actually been working on a tool called Igwet that I've been sitting around. I actually sold 6 months of scheduling services on it during the COVID, which is like the first time I've made any money in anything I've ever built selling to a customer. So it's not a great data point, but it's one data point that I've had. And it's like, oh, this is basically a mesh network for communication and documents, which I think I'm in the document, I'm betting that I could put my sweat equity into building something that would address Ernest's need for a sort of lightweight public chat messaging system. And in maybe 6 months, I could turn it into something that could do a really brain dead, simple, minimalist version of Planguage that could at least host a Datocracy definition. And I said, you know, that would be that to me feels like something worthwhile to do, to build that thing. But if I just do that, then the question becomes like, how do we, like, what happens to this thing? You know, who funds it, who runs it, who decides who owns it? And it's like, okay, I want to feel like, for me, that there's an end game, that there's something here that we can agree, okay, we disagree on a lot of things, but there's a core thing here that we do feel like is valuable and meaningful. And really, I wanted to be able to, so this is good to help me articulate this, and maybe this is the motion. One, there is a small set of things that is this sort of core Datocracy, let's call it, maybe to distinguish from all the other different versions of Datocracy, that I think all of us have a certain emotional tug towards. Two, it'd be really good if that was hosted and maintained in a central place with a process where we could iterate on it publicly and try to attract more people, so that this time next year we have 50 people here instead of 5 who say, yeah, we have a much clearer idea of what this is, and we have a much stronger level of allegiance and investment in it. And then 3, that we had something that people could formally join to show that, like, yeah, I want to help own and maintain this. That's kind of the bare bones way of looking at it, is I feel like I want to build something, I want it to represent this sort of core Datocracy idea, and I want to at least have the hope that we could find some way of creating shared ownership around it. That's kind of what the pitch is.
Yeah, and just to inject a little bit, that requires to be a robust identity and a way for you to know the person who wrote this is the person who says that Z wrote that. If we don't want to get into this Twitter stuff where there are bots and there are people, horrible people that say horrible things that they would not say to a person in their face. So to me, and that's, you know, we have things like secure elements that we can leverage to try to implement something like that. But to me, that's important. Like, yeah, this person says Ernest Bruce from, there are a bunch of us, but okay, this is the one from Costa Rica, and this is the one who lives in California now in Salinas, He used to be in the army. He used to be at Apple. I know this person. I see this picture and I know that who he is. There's another Ernest Bruce that lives somewhere else, but I'm dealing with this one. So this is technical, but to me it's foundational too. Like you have to trust that you know who you are talking with.
I think that's a primitive we can pull off the shelf. So that again, this is the most advanced project I know of. It's surprisingly out of Microsoft, but they hired a bunch of
there's lots of brilliant projects out of Microsoft. Very few of them turn into commercial successes.
This one, anyway, whatever. So decentralized identity, they're called DIDs, decentralized identities.
Yeah. So, right. So
that's a solved problem. Like, or we shouldn't try to solve that.
It's a solved technical problem. I would say it's actually a harder social problem, right? The real problem is you need both, right? You need to both have a technical. You have to have a social norm and set of policies for how you do things. And then you have to have technology that makes it efficient to enforce that, right?
I'm also agree with all that. I'm if you think Twitter is a place where horrible people say horrible things and you want to create a platform where anyone can participate, buckle up.
Let me be clear. Let me be clear what I want to create, okay? It's a small thing, but it is a thing, which is that I want to create a community that stewards Datocracy, right? And like the brilliant innovation of Wikipedia is not that they put encyclopedia online, it's that they said, okay, the talk page is only for discussing the articles. It's not for having random debates about abortion or history or whatever. And it's like, okay, let's just see if we can create a corner of the internet where we have civil discussions about this sort of core Datocracy and where we model these values that we're trying to promote. And, some of these things may become of general use and interest to other people. It might be a place where we just pull in lots of best practices from other places and do that. But the idea is that for me, there's something there's something inspirational about Ernest's vision, even if I disagree with 80% of it. There's a 20% that's like, dang, that is how I wish the world was. And there's got to be, and I feel like this combination of, bits of Planguage, bits of Web3, however you define it, some of these bits of Quilt and Databricks and Delta sharing, there's something there that if we could create a community of practice that says, hey, this is the right way to handle data when you make decisions, and then just promote that as a better way of living, it feels like that ought to have traction. That's the core idea. And we just solved that one small problem, but if we could do that, that enables us to solve so many other larger problems that are handicapped by simply a lack of a civil place and a immutable public record to make coherent decisions.
Well, I've got a hard stop at 2, so I just wanted to just do a quick introduction, belatedly a bit. I was basically a mobile developer. I've been in the field for roughly 9 years as a professional. I also have a background in user interaction design, and my basic, my whole stick is being in the intersection space between technology and people. Care a lot about bridging that gap and doing a better job than we have thus far. So that's where I feel like I can contribute the most is, what's the experience for the end user going to be like? How can this be something where a stereotypical grandmother would want to use this or even be able to understand it? So just wanted to throw that out before I go.
That's something that I think about all the time. Yes.
Yeah. And the short answer is that the best thing I can think of at this time is that it becomes something like a good housekeeping seal of approval. Like this company or this government body has a transparent decision-making process that's certified as level 3 Datocracy. That is the end user consumer goal that may be 5 years away. but that's what I'm thinking.
Cool.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Alonso. I unfortunately have to roll as well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ernie, for inviting us. Tom, really nice to meet you for the first time. Ernest, good to see you again. And we'll see you over your email. Thank you.
All right, I will let Alonso and Nish drop off, and the three of us who've been doing this the longest, let's see if we can make a decision of what we're going to do for the next.
Now you guys can make all the important
And then you
decisions.
guys will invite you back in February to see what we're going to do, right?
Maybe this meeting should be 2 hours next time. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know if I can handle 2 hours.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Yeah. So here's what I'd like to propose. I think there's two really interesting and hard short-term problems that are worth trying to see if we can solve. So one is sort of Ernest's problem of building a public messaging server. So right now, Ernest and I have these Fleep conversations, which are really interesting, but they're all locked up in the Fleep app, and it's really hard to invite other people to. And it would be relatively easy for me to take my existing tool, which already does some chat messaging, and turn it into a public version of what Ernest and I are already doing on Fleep, so that, and maybe even making, this is harder, a little sign up page where people can sign up and say, I want to join this conversation. But actually, even that's less important. I could add you all to it, and then we could subscribe to things and see if it works. That's something I could build in a month that would be interesting. And what I would suggest is maybe next week, Ernest, you and I write up the specs for that, the minimum viable product for that. Tom's waving his hands, and
Ernie, you froze for me.
oh, okay.
Okay. So you were frozen for about 15 seconds.
Okay. So I was going to suggest this. So part A is I want to sit down with Ernest and see if I can spec out a lightweight public messaging server that will address his needs, because that'll solve a problem for him and something that I've been wanting to do anyway. And so I suggest we do that for our next meeting. For the next thing that I wanted to really talk about with you, Tom, because this is obviously very much in your wheelhouse, is this idea, what I call the Planguage publishing server. Right, so I love Valplan as a tool for really digging into the weeds of this, but it's a horrible tool for publishing stuff on the internet. Right, and it's like, that's actually what I care about. I want a dumb tool that I can just post on there and share links to everybody I know without them having to log in or do it, and then they can see all the versions. And so my dream, the thing that I would love to be able to do, is to take something like the 5 critical objectives, or whatever they were, critical values of Planguage, and put them on a public versioned website, with all the hyperlinks to the definitions. And it's like, if I just had that, that would make me happy.
Now,
the data's out there, so that people can say, well, what do you mean Datocracy? It's like, look here, this is it. This is the definitions. You can see it and browse it, and you at least know what it is we currently think. And then if we revise it, people can see the versions of it. Like, just having that, basically a little CMS for a really brain dead simple version of Planguage that people could see and that we could edit, that would make me happy. I don't know if that matters to anybody else, but it would make me really happy. And it feels like now, then I could actually start having much better conversations with the rest of the world.
Now, why don't we use Git for that? It will be the obvious question.
I tried, right? My very first version of this was using GitHub and Git. And what we discovered was that the granularity was off. Is that you couldn't create, Git does not make it at all easy to create shared definitions. If I want to create 2 documents that reference the same word, that is extraordinarily painful to do with Git. Remember how easy it was with Valplan? Was we just bracket a word and hit tab, and it gives us a little pop-up. Like, that difference in affordance was hugely beneficial. And that was the thing that just a brain dead Git system didn't do.
Correct. Yes, really, really granular at the word level, that you can point to it, that it could be forked, and that you can follow all those things.
Right.
That's the end point. That's the end point.
But and so the idea is that just being able to publish it in a way that preserves this hyperlinked sort of definitional thing that to me. So that's what I would want to propose for like, so first of all, you know, it seems like Tom was at least open to the idea of something like that happening. And so I guess what I want to do is like, so next week, let you and I have the conversation about messaging. And then maybe the following week, Tom, you and I could just sit on Ernest and whoever else wants to join us. And can we come up with an MVP for a Planguage publishing system that would not horribly shock and embarrass you? That's really the question. If I can come up with something that's simple enough,
sounds good to me.
Like I could build it that won't horrify you, you know, that you're not ashamed to put the name Planguage on. That would feel like an achievement. And so
remember, we've been doing Planguage for 50 years, at least. So we're used to doing it in Word and spreadsheets and other simpler things, right? So ValPlan is a relatively recent innovation. So I'm not at all worried about going to a simpler format for certain purposes.
Yeah. And so, yeah, this is always, but you've been preaching this. I've got to, by the way, I have to send you the Elon Musk article. I think I put it in the chat. The Elon Musk secret sauce. It's from the Wait But Why.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I put it's in the chat. You can save it, but also I have a series of notes I've been putting up in a draft folder. I'll email to you. But one thing that it struck me was it's not just that he iterates on his ideas. What the article claims is what Elon Musk does, he iterates on his own assumptions and on the mechanisms he uses to improve the accuracy of those assumptions. That it was what he claimed was Elon Musk's real secret sauce. Is he didn't just try to optimize and iterate on the world, he optimized and iterated on himself and his own beliefs. And I thought that was a really profound insight. And that to me is actually a big part of why I do these things, is that having these public communities with people like you pushes me to update my thinking of what's possible, what's real, and what could be done next. And so that's what I want to really focus on this month, I guess, is having those conversations of like slicing up, you know, the minimal pieces of these things. And then, you know, maybe let's plan on, you know, for those of you watching this video, we'll have a monthly check-in in February and see if we've converged, like, oh yeah, these things are all reasonable and doable and they would get us there, or diverged and we find out like we can't reach agreement. But I think that we're close enough that we might have something. Now, of course, my life is also insane in various dimensions, some of which are getting better, some of which may be getting worse, and I'm not even sure which is better and which is worse. So whether I can actually deliver any of this, I don't know, but at least if we can define a problem that is worth doing, that makes it much more likely that it will happen.
Yeah, and I think like similarly to both of you in that, and maybe even Elon Musk, I don't know, in that as I identify a problem and then I immerse myself in it. You know, I've been working on this Everline thing that I've been doing this for years without knowing what it was. I want a way to make the written word pop at you. I don't want people to just, you know, to scan a paragraph and say, what it is, what it is. No, it has to be just like code. You can see a command, you can know what a function is, and then its parameters and its the data types. You can see that just by a glance, but you cannot get a paragraph or a sentence just at a glance. You have to scan it. Okay, what is the verb? What is the is an adjective? Is it a pronoun? I want those things to pop at you so that you don't have to waste time decipher them. So I've been working on that, and you know, I'm with the Elements of Style book, and I'm like, oh yeah, I like that rule, but no, it doesn't make sense because it's just an opinion. So I'm not doing that. So I think simple language is very important in communications and knowledge. So you need to simplify this, and that's what I'm been working on. And I've been applying these methods of, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to choose to identify adverbs this way, and I'm okay. Oh, there's a problem because whatever. So I kind of iterate and I learn and kind of document my learnings in this Omni Outliner document. Which,
oh my goodness, Omni Outliner, that brings back memories. I love
unfortunately, it is hard for me to take that out and share it, because you have to have Omni Onliner and know how to use it, or you get an ugly PDF that is just terrible, and so you can't. It's hard to extract information, even though it's.
This is who's the guy from Radio Lab, Dave Weiner. Like his whole shtick was based around outlining and RSS and everything flowed out of that. And so that's actually, not a infeasible thing to consider in our roadmap next week for a messaging system and a documentation system is, having a easy way to take outline formatted documents and import them into this system. Anyway, I have to get back to my day job. I think this was a fascinating conversation, and even though it never goes anywhere like I think it will, I was actually encouraged. So we have a plan for the next 2 weeks, which is further ahead than we've ever planned anything in Datocracy before. And I think at the end of those 2 weeks, we'll have a much clearer idea of what happens next.
I have one question about the Zoom call, and this is the chat part. I can't seem to be able to save it. Do you lose it when the call ends? Is there a way to?
So you can't go back and save it, but I will save it. And I'm actually going to post the whole chat in the description of the YouTube channel so you can grab it from there.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. On that note, I will call the meeting. Thank you all very much. Have a good night, Tom.